Greetings, everyone. This is Terrell Wilson again with Leaders of Color. And I have had the pleasure over the last year to meet many cool and awesome alumni. But I've also got to meet this brother some time ago. And he is a dynamic brother that is, creating his own path down in New Orleans. So it is my pleasure to introduce Mr. Brent Bailey, Louisiana class of 2022. Brent, what's up? Welcome.
What's going on? What's going on? Pleasure to be here. I'm excited and, thank you. It's been a pleasure knowing you as well. So yeah, let's get it going.
Get it going. So how did you hear about Leaders of Color? What drew you to it and why did you apply? And then eventually, of course you were accepted. What did you get out of it? How did you feel about it? All of those things.
Yeah. So, I'll never forget the day. I was literally at work, and my boss, who is also a Leaders of Color alumni, he comes into work, and he has on this jacket, and it says Leaders of Color. And of course, I'm looking at him like, man, it's a cool jacket. I give him a compliment. But the thing that really caught my attention, right? So in Leaders of Color, there is the Democratic D is what I call it. And I'm looking at him like, I know that that font looks familiar. I don't know if this is anything to do with, or I said that looks familiar. So I just remember asking him a few questions like, hey, what's that? And he was like, oh yeah, this is Leaders of Color. I'm a part of it. He gives his elevator speech. And I'm like, okay, I'm interested. And he was like, okay, I got you. And literally just that little small conversation, after that, I did some research. He was like, he was going to help me and talk to some people he knows. And I was like, okay, cool. So I knew I was interested from that, but really what sparked my attention and imagination was I talked to some mentors. I was like, hey, I'm interested in this. And they were like, yeah, you should really look into it. And from there, I was like, all right, Leaders of Color, let me apply. And this was, Leaders of Color is always going to hold a special place in my heart. This was the first fellowship, first dynamic place I've ever been accepted into. So I'm always going to go back to my roots with Leaders of Color. So yeah, that was the beginning of how I got with the organization.
Awesome. So, we do a lot of training and teaching in the program, but we try to create a strong environment for, a network, building your network. Do you have any reflections on that part of the program, the networking part, where you are with your cohort members?
Oh yeah. So that off top was one of the best experiences I remember having. So when I got accepted, and of course, moving into the first few weeks, I was like, I'm this young guy, I'm meeting these people. And Leaders of Color put you in such a different space than you're accustomed to, whether you're early in your career, mid-career, you've lived out a full career. All of those people are in this one space, and we all look at leadership from a different perspective and bring all of our rich experiences together. So, I mean, for me, my cohort, looking back on it, I'm in a room with doctors, lawyers, whoever, and outside of what they did for a profession, just some of the wisdom they had and some of the things that they were able to tell me about their experiences in Louisiana, politics, education, you name it, they came from that field. So I can attest to just how great that network was. And I know whenever, I see my alumni on social media or my cohort doing some great things, I'm trying to support, hey, how can I show up? Can I donate? Can I do this? Because it's really some great people you meet who, again, we're just not often put into these spaces. So I really appreciate the cohort camaraderie and fellowship that I got to experience with them.
So you were part of the cohort or part of the fellowship, and we know civic, political, some leadership parts of it. What would you see as the most impactful in your leadership journey? So what part of the program would you see as impactful? The most impactful?
So there was a bunch of moments that stuck out, of course, right, through in person, like, and that's also one thing I have to say, Leaders of Color engages your learning capabilities on a lot of different levels. However, if there was one moment that stuck out, I'll never forget, it was a course where we were talking about storytelling and mastering your story. And at the time, Tyrone is in this, we're at the end of the session, and he's basically calling on us, and he's like, I need you all to now practice it. So of course, after the session, all of us are kind of like, it's time to go, great power, we're about to just go on. But then he was like, no, I'm gonna challenge you all to master and perfect your story. So of course, me being, one of the younger professionals there, I'm thinking to myself, well, you're not gonna call on me. And I'll never forget, this was a turning point for me in Leaders of Color, because before this course, I had thought of myself as kind of like the baby, that imposter syndrome that, sometimes we as professionals often feel in or outside of Black spaces. And Tyrone calls me, he's like, tell your story. And I'm like, my story, I just got into this. I'm not really, story, what do I have when I'm looking at literally core members who have been in this game for 10, 20 plus years, like multitude of experiences. But all in all, I remember like just coming up with something for the obvious like moment. But after that, I really realized like, no, you are meant to be here. You do have a story. And it's since that class that literally, like I said, was that turning point, I've learned to look at what different experiences have made me who I am, and how that has shaped my leadership, and where that will propel me in future leadership opportunities and positions. So that really challenged me, and it took me away out of this mindset of I'm not ready, or I'm too young, or I don't belong, and put me in the mindset of, no, wherever I am, whether I'm representing leaders of color or not, is that I deserve to be in this space, and I am going to tell you why and what made me, who I am. So that was definitely a defining, pivotal moment, and where I started to feel like, okay, I belong here. So yeah, I'll never forget that.
So I think, what part of what I heard you say, and I heard you bring up imposter syndrome. And I think, having a conversation with multiple people, that's something that comes up a lot, right? Imposter syndrome. And so if you can kind of tell us how, for you as a professional, right? Because I think a lot of professionals have that issue at some point, how you, is it something that you still struggle with, number one? And if it is, how do you overcome it on a day-to-day basis? And if not, then, how did you overcome it?
Sure. Yeah. So for me, a little while after, while I was in that position, and I know we can kind of touch on that more, but coming into what I was in, I definitely still felt there was moments where, am I the necessarily right person to be speaking on this? Do I have the credibility? Do I fit, and do I belong? And I can tell the switch came as far as me kind of feeling like, no, I belong here, as I started doing more opportunities. And that's one of the things Leaders of Color help do, is open more doors. And while I do feel like we're all public servants naturally, or we all have experiences serving our communities, now with that extra organization backing and support, I felt like when I went into these different rooms, it was more of like that confidence that I had from that moment that changed. It just was always there. Like, I kind of now practice a little bit, just those affirmations. That's what really helped me. Of course, prayer, of course, constant work and preparation, but it's the affirmations, it's telling myself, okay, how can I calm myself down? How can I, prepare for this? You're going to do well. And the small things, the little details about winning, and whatever it is, whether you're doing a speaking engagement, or whether you're doing just talking to some kids, or if you're doing a community service event, Leaders of Color also help me stay on my toes and keep me like, whenever something's about to happen, just kind of like stay ready, stay prepared, instead of like having to get ready. Don't have to think of your story, know your story. And that's what helped me realize, like, okay, I'm built for this. I'm well prepared, and whatever comes my way as a leader, I can handle it. So yeah, that's basically kind of like how I overcame imposter syndrome. It's literally like a me thing. It's not what the world sees me as, but like internally, I'm gonna come ready. So yeah.
Right. So we talked about being a professional, and right out of college, you began your career as a program manager for New Orleans Office of Gun Violence Prevention, right? Can you tell us why you're passionate about this work?
Sure. So for me, I mean, just growing up in Louisiana, right? As many or just many people know, Louisiana for the longest, and still to this day, has been among the top states to lead the country, and if not the world, in incarceration. So while I cannot say I have a direct family member or was directly impacted by that, living in a state where that is the constant, or that was the constant focus of seeing families divided. And then also, too, when we start talking about my matriculation after and throughout college, I kind of came throughout college when police brutality, social injustices were arising. So that motivation was there from jump, I think. And so my background a little bit, my mother is a principal, father is a pastor. So it was always kind of instilled in me those values of community service and knowing your community and advocating for them, whether I knew it or not. So all of those things, I think, helped my development and kind of steered me in the right direction. But if there was one also pivotal moment that I think I still hang on to this day, I'll never forget. It was shortly after Hurricane Katrina had devastated my hometown. When my family returned back, it was my mother and I was like maybe 10, 11, 12 years old. We get pulled over by a police officer. And in this exchange, I'll never forget the powerlessness and the sense of defeat I felt as a little kid, seeing a police officer talk to my mother a certain way, and me being like, I can't do anything, and just having to live with that, and knowing that there was never, like, this wasn't a situation where there was cameras recorded, right? Or the situation where fortunately no one lost their lives, but it was still traumatic. And building on all those things, like I said, in my background, and then with that experience, that really led me into criminal justice and studying that in school. And then after I graduated, I came from a PWI, and their big focus was law enforcement, go there, or if not, parole or something with law school. And I was like, well, I don't really think any of those are right for me. And again, I'm leaving college in the midst of this time where it was following George Floyd. It was following all of these different social justice cases. So from that moment, and this is why I like to lean on my faith and say God's timing is everything. The office that I was at was created literally a year after I graduated. And soon after I joined it, when I saw that there was this office that was community-based, that was around here, that was a space that people who look like me, talk like me, came from similar experiences were there, I knew that was the place for me, and where, again, all of my experiences come together, and I can be with these people who want to see our community better from a non-punitive approach. So that was the biggest thing for me. And, since then, I've only seen myself grow leaps and bounds, and career take off from there. So yeah, it was a no-brainer for the Office of Gun Violence Prevention. I was like, this is exactly the space I wanted to be in, coming out of college.
So as you talk about the Office of Gun Violence Prevention, you view, or you approach gun violence from a public health lens. Can you please expand on your philosophy and strategies that you use when it comes to viewing it through that lens, through the public health lens?
Sure, yeah. So again, Louisiana, as I've said before, has a long history of criminal or punitive approach to gun violence, to crime. And while I would be the first to say, and many of us in this space would say, there is an aspect needed of making sure that our criminal legal system works, and that those who have impacted someone or committed a crime do deserve to be held accountable for that, right? However, the public health approach, what it does is it centers communities, and most importantly, identifies the root causes of why crime is happening. So a lot of those social determinants, such as your environment, such as your community, your socioeconomic status, those things are what we focus on in public health. And that allows you to see the humanity in things. Whereas from the punitive approach, we see the more in a black and white term. If you commit the crime, you got to do the time. Well, the new approach with public health allows us to say, yes, we do have a crime epidemic going on in our community, but we also know that arresting our way out of it isn't the solution, and it shouldn't have never been the solution. It only further divides us. So it's a lot of bringing communities together and empowering them to take charge, to see and be the change they want to be in their communities. It's not anymore, while we do have elected officials and different people, stakeholders, law enforcement, attorneys, the DA, whoever you want to say, who are especially called to be in this space, we ultimately know that the solution is going to come from the community. So that's what the public health approach is all about.
So it kind of, it gives a more nuanced approach, right? And it's more proactive as opposed to reactive.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so being a part of the Office of Gun Violence Prevention, you expanded the Barbers and Beauticians Collective Fellowship since working for the city of the Office of Gun Violence Prevention. So tell us about the Barbers and Beauticians Collective Fellowship and its aim, what it does, and what you did to grow it again.
Yeah. So that was very interesting. So when I came to the Office of Gun Violence Prevention, of course, like, I was blown away by this public health approach. I was blown away by being in a space that was non-punitive. And I was like, yay, I finally get to show my family this degree that, we worked so hard for is paying off. You may have not thought this existed, but, it was kind of like this hoorah moment. And I'll never forget the first day I was told, you're going to be in charge or tasked with, our Barbers and Beauticians Collective Fellowship. And for me, I was like, what do Barbers and Beauticians have to do with gun violence, right? Especially in New Orleans. But going back to what I just said, the public health approach empowers those in the community and those who have been there, will be there long after any elected official is in office. So with that, the strategy used to grow this program was something that was innovative, that took time, that took a lot of conversations, meetings, you name it. And it wasn't always the best. It was a lot of highs and a lot of lows as well. And ultimately, I think why it's one of the highlights of my young and early career is because what oftentimes I feel like people don't think about with these programs, like, it's new, it's innovative, yes, but with Barbers and Beauticians, they are also like business people. They have multiple careers, hustles, families, just like anyone else. So to get, right, in the first cohort when I got there, there was only 10 or 11 so people committed to the program. And then the following year, when I was able to take over the cohort, we grew it to 18, somewhere between 18 to 20. And for me, that was very big because it shows that the community bought into what we were doing. They bought into the public health approach. They saw that, oh, there actually is something that is out here trying to empower us, that's out here trying to say whatever we can do to alleviate gun violence without just throwing away the key and saying you're going to go to prison, let's do it. And I'm really proud to say that in that next cohort that was over, we were able to do 2 big community service projects, free haircuts in 2 of the most impacted communities in New Orleans, where we gave away haircuts, school supplies. The kids basically were able to get game trucks, free food. And we also, right, from the public health approach, were able to do health screenings for the parents. So while your kid may be getting a haircut or playing the games, you can also get health screenings and learn, some of those things, because we don't talk about that side of crime either. how it affects our mental, our physical, our emotional state. So that was really the two big wins. And to grow the program, it was just more so we learned about gun violence from all different perspectives, from gun rights owners, from different people who, tell you about a firearm and purchasing it and how to store it, how to stop the bleed. If you're in a situation where someone gets shot, how can you, if you're living in a rural area, how can you help out before the ambulance or assistance comes? So all of those different things were really unique and, first time for me, but to see the community buy-in again was the biggest thing. And to see them stay committed all the way through, really, I think it means the world to me. And I still look back at it today as like one of the best highlights of my career.
Awesome. So recently you did leave your past office, right? And started as a regional advocacy associate with the Community Justice Action Fund. Tell us about that. Tell us about it. Expand there.
Yeah. So again, and I'd be remiss if I didn't say, so who I told you about earlier, right? Patrick Young, who was the great mentor and the person who taught me the game about city, working in government, and kind of opened the doors and was the person who gave me that first opportunity. I have to say, if it wasn't for him, I wouldn't be where I was today. So in his position, I said the Barbers and Beauticians, this is something where I've seen growth. I want to take it to the next step. And for me, that was legislative and working with policy members and really affecting change on that level. So community justice was a unique opportunity. It is a survivor-led national nonprofit dedicated to ending gun violence in communities that are most impacted, of course. And, that whole program that I'm with now, we are really focused heavy on different education campaigns, again, working with those policymakers, but seeing the effective change at the top versus where I was with the city of New Orleans, working more on the ground and boots on the ground. So ultimately still in the same work, but just a different line of work and different things that we're working towards. But like I said, it's truly been a blessing, and to work now in a space where it's conducive to you're not just your professional growth, but your personal growth, and that really prioritizes the communities that are most impacted and centering them and elevating them as well is what community justice is all about. So yeah, definitely a huge step in the next step, but ultimately somewhere where I think I want to see some huge strides and bounds and growth for sure. So yeah.
So throughout this conversation, right, we've highlighted your passion for community. And so I want you to kind of tell the folks who might be interested in community action. I want you to give them some advice. What should they do? How should they get involved? What are the ways that they can, make a difference in their respective neighborhoods?
Yes. So first, I definitely would also be remiss if I didn't insert this little push. So with my new role with community justice, we are doing our first ever Louisiana state coalition, and we'll be working with different advocacy groups, lobbying groups, boots on the ground, you name it, organizations that are dedicated towards community violence intervention. And those who are working, whether it's New Orleans, Baton Rouge, Lafayette, Monroe, Shreveport, across the state, we are looking for those who have been in this work and who are looking to receive funds from the federal government, their city government, whatever. We are going to have our first statewide coalition meeting on Wednesday, February 8th from 6:30 p.m. to 9:30 p.m. The marketing and all of the invitations are currently, as I speak, being in the works of being put out. So that's the first thing. I'll just say that for anybody who's more interested in the work. But secondly, and most importantly, what anyone out there today can do is, if it's just a little bit more civic engagement, if it's just going to that city council meeting, if it's working with that local organization, that's the best way to help amplify the work that we're doing. I know everyone thinks that ultimately when it comes to, we live in this ultimatum where if we want to see change, it either is a yes or a no, it passed or it didn't. But I feel like for those of us who are truly in the work, you understand that this is a long battle and that ultimately there's going to be some ups and downs. But yeah, for those of you who are interested in doing more in your community to prevent gun violence, to get involved, to possibly run for office, right? All of those things start with getting to know your community a little bit better, working with each other and building coalition and building community. No matter what happens with elected officials or what happens with policy, ultimately communities are where the strength is, and working amongst each other and not against each other is going to be the key for us to succeed in any and all policy. So that would be my biggest piece of advice or suggestion for anyone out there.
There you have it, our brother Brent Bailey from Louisiana, again, class of 2022. I'm Terrell Wilson with Leaders of Color. Again, you can check us out on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, now YouTube. I always do this, I end up putting people on the spot. So I'm gonna do it again to you, Brent. Just leave us with a last word, brother.
Yeah, sure. If there's anyone out there, I always like to ask myself, if not you, who? If not now, when? It is the perfect time to get involved. The best thing I can say about Leaders of Color, about the work that I'm doing, is that I've been blessed to be in these spaces, but ultimately that I soon realized it doesn't matter who you are, where you're from, or your background. Anyone can get involved and be a change in their community, and it's going to take all of us. So that's my last words. Thank you, Terrell, Leaders of Color. I appreciate y'all. It's like family every time we link. So, I just look forward to where Leaders of Color is going to go, and I know we're going to do some great things. So, yeah.
Thank you, Brent.
Thank you.